welcome back to one of our special episodes. It's been a while since I did one of those, and today I'm here with the returning guest, Brandon Martin. So, hello, Brandon. I know we did another one of these shows talking about a video game, Final Fantasy VII. So, I guess today we are back to talk about another video game. So, yeah, first of all, welcome. How are you doing?
Oh, first, I'd like to say it's a pleasure to be back here. I got a lot of compliments on our work together, especially that Final Fantasy VII episode, and I think we really did a good job covering that. And things are going really good, you know, father life, stay-at-home father life, and dog life, chilling with the dogs as always. But yeah, I'm excited to get into this episode with you. It's something that I've been wanting to dive deep into for many, many years since I was a child. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to what we're going to lay down here today. And hopefully it will be revealing for some people who have not done any research into these kind of topics. One thing I would like to just come out and say as a caveat is that this video game has probably been covered more than any other video game in history, just because of how renowned it is and how famous it is and how many people have kind of understood that there was something more going on underneath the layers of just playing the game itself, especially with its narrative and its story structure and characters and world building. So you will find a lot of people out there who has done a lot of work on this game. I hope to bring, I'm sure you too, I hope to bring something of a little bit more sophisticated look into it, and a deeper look at some of these things, and maybe bring something new to the table that somebody has not already covered. So some of my work will be built, some of the things I'll say here will be built upon some other people's works, and when that comes up, in my notes, I do have it there that if I have got this from another source, I will try to state that. But a lot of, like I said, I've been studying this game since I was a young kid, so
And we are talking about Metal Gear Solid 2.
That's right. We're I guess that's important too. We are talking about Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty.
Exactly. And that whole series of games, I think it's very, I had the occasion of getting into them recently, and trying to study them and notice things in them. And yeah, I've went up to Metal Gear Solid 4. So there are 4 main games. Then there's a lot of spin-offs and sort of prequels and going back and forth in time. So there's quite a bit of that. But I must say the main games, the ones I got into, that they are quite interesting. There are lots of layers in there. First of all, well, you have the whole geopolitics and espionage, and it's all really related to geopolitics on the surface. However, there are quite a few philosophical themes and more, I'd say. And I guess we'll try to get into some of these themes that we find in the game, even those that, yeah, as we said, are not maybe readily on the surface. And I know there's quite a bit of cinematic expression also in these games. That's one of the things that makes them particular, I guess. So, but yeah, actually, there are a few more games that were. I think the first one was in like 1987, and then the second one in 1990. Actually, so those were the two earlier edition of Metal Gear, which are also kind of interesting. There's quite a few references to some of some famous movies like the Terminator and I think, well, obviously Escape from New York, where we get the main character, called Snake, and obviously inspired by Snake Plissken. So those were quite interesting. Yeah, I watched some of those also. So I mean, for that time, for that early on, they were quite different also from some of the other stuff, especially for the tactical espionage side of things. Because I think they were the first ones of that genre, maybe, right?
Yeah, as far as what I know, they were revolutionary, the early Metal Gear games, in bringing in the tactical espionage side of things, specifically the stealth side. They really hadn't had any kind of game on those platforms that had made stealth really fun with the limited hardware, of the time, obviously. Hideo Kojima actually worked on two other games that I personally really liked. One was Snatcher. I believe that was his first game, and then he went on to go to make Police Knots. And both of these, there's references throughout all of his games to his earlier works. So that's something that I'm going to talk about here shortly with this specific game that we're going to cover. But
just one thing. We're still talking about 2D for the first two games.
Yes.
So
yes,
quite amazing for the.
Yeah, absolutely. They're 2D. They're not in 3D. Those early games, Police Knots and Snatchers, are actually old point-and-click games, and they're very, story driven, where it's not real. There's not a lot of action. There's, it's not like Super Nintendo or Nintendo style gameplay normally, like Mario and stuff like that. Very story driven, noir detective styles, future dystopic, world. And his themes are pretty consistent and prolific through all his games for what's taking place geopolitically, like you're saying, in the world at that time. And then also what the dangers of those ideas and axioms and philosophies are taken to the extreme into the future, what the potential dangers of those ideas would be, actually. So for me personally, I got my first PlayStation because of Metal Gear Solid, the first game that came out. And then when they released the PlayStation 2, that's why I bought PlayStation 2 as well, was because they were releasing Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, on that specific device. And I remember when I was a kid, it was like the main thing I was focused on. And there was a demo that that game came with another game, which was Zone of Enders, which is kind of like a futuristic mech game of that time period. So I bought that Zone of Enders game first, just so I could play the demo of Metal Gear Solid 2.
And they're all by Kojima. That's another game from Hideo Kojima.
Yeah. So I didn't know that, actually, but now that you're saying that, I think I might have found that somewhere. But so I've had a firm hold of this game since 2001, when it was actually released. This game is so prolific, and I think you kind of covered a lot of the basis of what I wanted to talk about. The main thing that I want to bring to the table is this idea of memetics that Richard Dawkins actually proposed in his, I think it was a 1979 work, his book The Selfish Gene. And he was trying to figure out how culture can be applied to Darwin's ideas of natural selection. And he was contending with the ideas that genes are not the only proprietor of passing information on, and dealing with some of the a lot of the issues that were coming from Darwin's ideas. And he was contending with it on a cultural level, and his premise and his whole idea was that memes are actually what genes are, but in an informational standpoint for things like passing down information such as history, cultural references, traditions, things like this, because none of these things actually get passed down through genes. You don't really have, a historical documentation of the culture of, the American Revolution or something like this in the genes. So he's saying, hey, there's this thing called a meme, and this is not to be confused with the current use of the term memes, though it does relate to it. I would consider it to be a more declined form of it, a lesser form of what Richard Dawkins was talking about. So he's saying that it's kind of this social Darwinistic idea of memes of what is the most strongly acceptable and accepted throughout the culture that will survive through into the next generation. So, and this can be very dangerous, obviously, because it's very subjective to the collective mindset of what they are viewing as the most useful or could be the most pleasurable. It doesn't have to be based in truth, obviously. So you can have this whole issue of a whole culture, attaching themselves to things that make them feel good, but it's all lies and deceit. And then they pass that down as information into the next culture, and that's called mimetic transfer. So this game kind of deals with that on a in an existential way, on a philosophical concept. That's what Hideo Kojima was really trying to point out, which was the dangers of mimetic warfare and where human beings are actually limited in their ability to deal with information and how much junk information is actually out there. And I mean, we see that today with the way that the media works, Fox News, CNN, all this stuff, all the, I don't like using the term fake news, but yes, all the fake news and all the lies and deceit that is being propagated, and how many people actually are attaching themselves to this. So this mimetic warfare is currently taking place, but as I said, it was very prolific for him to be able to recognize the issues of the internet age, which we were moving into. And if you actually go back and, like play the game or watch anything of it, you'll see like how it is still very, very sound with what is currently taking place, especially here in the West. But it's also taking place in the East, but they have a much, stricter lockdown on a lot of that stuff that we don't have yet, but it is coming, obviously. So yeah, that's one thing. So I don't know if you're familiar with Richard Dawkins' idea of the selfish gene in his book and how he was trying to apply it. Now, Richard Dawkins is a materialist. He's an atheist, and he has a lot of issues with a lot of his theories, and I don't agree with most of what he says. However, I do agree that this idea of mimetic transfer is a real phenomenon that does take place, and we do see that as an empirical evidence throughout history, though a lot of, current sociologists and a lot of people who study this do take contention with it in the academic fields. But this game really flushes that out. It flushes the philosophical questions out of, what happens when human beings have so much information and, moving into the internet age, and they don't have a filtration system set up to actually deal with the junk information. And what happens when the whole species decides to latch on to that junk information, being things of moral relativity, things of authority, things of, like I said, lies, manipulation, and they promote that as if it's the most useful for the next generation, and it becomes this mimetic transference of these ideas to build these axioms that then people go on to continue to use over and over and over, right?
Well, it seems the answer that they have in the video game is, it's sort of to, it's obviously control the information, because that's the way they that's the way that they are, that some of the characters there in the game are try to kind of spin it that, we need control of the information, because there is too much junk information, which is what, the controllers of today are saying to us to justify the control of the internet and the fact checking. So
Yep.
uh,
That is right. So this also
so
deals with the ideas of AI,
yes,
and where AI comes into play when dealing with the control of
yeah,
information. And
because
now,
yeah, no,
go ahead. Yeah.
I wanted to say that in the game there's actually one of the characters Raiden, in the end talks with these AIs that were actually manipulating him, and in the end they do their speech, the sort of bad guy speech, quote unquote. But but it's interesting. It's interesting how what they say, especially when talking about the control of the internet and censor and basically censorship. So and they try to they rationalize it, and you can really hear. I mean, what as I was saying, what the power structure is telling us today. So we have to protect people from themselves, so etc. Because they do, otherwise they do the wrong, make the wrong choices and the wrong
Yep.
things. And so it's interesting they have this, and they talk about the what we know today as the post-truth era, I guess. So
Mm-hmm.
that's another theme in there. But they have this S3 program, I think, which actually stands for it's the Selection for Societal Sanity.
Yes.
And it has to do with
Yep.
basically having a tight control over people and what they get to hear and get to see. So
That's
that was
right.
interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought the S3 up. That's in my notes as well. I like to give an example of memes though here, just so that whoever's watching this will kind of understand what I mean by this. So if you go back and you watch the intro of the game, it's very amazingly done for the time period. It's very cinematic. Obviously, Hideo Kojima, one of his main priorities is to bring in the cinema technique and cinema language because he loves cinema so much. He actually wanted to get into making movies, which now he is doing that. And he's working with Del Toro and a few other people from the movie industry. But he ends up working with a lot of people in the Hollywood industry, actually. But and you can see that with all the all the references to other movies in his game, like you were pointing out with Escape from New York and things like this. So the game takes place in New York, and as you're moving through the beginning, you see that it's this cloaked figure walking across the bridge, which is the George Washington Bridge. So already, right off the bat, as a gamer, as a player, this is what happened to me. I was super curious, like, am I playing as this character Solid Snake? Because the main drive for all the players was to come back and play as Solid Snake. Just like whenever you want to play a James Bond video game, you expect to play as James Bond. So you're not really sure who this character is at first because he's, cloaked in this raincoat. And then he starts running, and then one thing happens, which is he rips the cloak off, and then right at the same time, he initiates the stealth camo. Now, for those who have played the game previously, they would recognize the stealth camo as an item, a secret item that you get in the previous game. So that's a meme carrying on already. First you got the meme of the George Washington Bridge, the location, New York. You also have the meme of the stealth camo and this idea of pretty much it's inspiring the James Bond thing of being a stealth assassin and things like this. So you don't know who this is, but your expectation is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna, this is probably Solid Snake, and then he goes and he jumps off the bridge, right? And when he jumps off the bridge, he's tied to a bungee cord. Now we have to think about this in a symbolic way. What does this bring to mind? Well, it brings to mind the hero Spider-Man, actually. So this is a meme of Spider-Man because the most well-known hero of New York is in the comic book mythology and and all this is the Spider-Man character. And he looks like Spider-Man because he's doing these kind of acrobatics and things like this. He's still in stealth camo. Then he lands, and then as you referenced earlier, you have a Terminator theme that takes place where he is on his knees and he slowly rises up, and there's electricity all around him like the T-800 in the first Terminator, and that theme continues in all the Terminators, that theme of that time travel, electricity, right?
Yeah, in the first game, I think the image of Snake resembles that of Kyle Reese when he's in the future fighting in the Resistance, fighting the Terminators. So.
You got it. That's absolutely right. So you're getting this multi-layered theme of this mimetic information transference. Okay, so you have the Spider-Man theme, you have the New York Manhattan theme, you have George Washington, which is all tying in to a meme of America as well. But what else can we pull out of this? It actually ties into things like the American Revolution because it's taking place on the Hudson River. So that's the actual Hudson River there. And there's a lot to the Hudson River, which I will get to. But it's blending so when he's jumping off the bridge, right, he's diving off and he's in stealth camo. This is some of the advancements of the cinema techniques that's being used in the video game industry, even though it's not technically being done with cameras, like physical cameras. He's invisible, but he's blending like the Predator. So the stealth camo is also coming from the Predator franchise as well. That's another mimetic thing that's going on there, and he's blending in with the bridge. So he's actually blending in with the landmark of the George Washington Bridge, which is a extremely well-known area. So it's saying that Snake is the landmark of the series. It's bringing in this idea that everybody is here to play as this individual. This is the hero, Spider-Man, this is the hero of America, George Washington. You have this multi-theme thing going on with this. So that's it. Also brings to mind one more thing, and a lot of people didn't catch this, but the electricity. There's a few things I want to talk about the electricity throughout this episode, but one thing is also brings to mind Benjamin Franklin, because it's the rainstorm, you got electricity, and you have the American meme of New York and that time period of American history. And what also takes place at that time period? Oh, Benjamin Franklin's story. So you also have that being layered on top of it. So that's just a few layers, and you can continue to just pull back that scene over and over and over. But those are all memes. They're an imitation of something that came before that's being preserved in something new. So we could even look at this in the way that Douglas Martin would talk about it, is that these are complex forms that are coming from more simple forms. So they're trying to take what is the old and bring it into the new, but represent it in a way that's digestible. The problem is that can obviously lose the substance of what the pure form actually has, or what the pure like I said, I think I said it the best there, the pure form actually has, because a form is nothing unless it has a substance. It's an empty shell, and we will get to that later. So I don't know if you got anything you wanted to say on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It definitely is. It's definitely complex. It really gets into complex forms. I agree. We could say that, and also I wanted to say, maybe to anticipate that the American Revolution is a big theme, another big theme in the game, and I think there are for various aspects that maybe we'll talk about later. So, yeah.
Yeah. The other, like I said here, the other thing that takes place is that you're on the the Hudson River, And the Hudson River is extremely crucial for the American Revolution. And we have this thing called the Hudson River Strategy, which primarily refers to the British plan in the American Revolution to control the Hudson River because of the import and export and all of the things that were going on there. And you find this throughout history, that if you control the river in those areas, you're usually controlling the war that's taking place, because those are the primary means for your supplies, your resources, and that includes your men to be transported. But also it's a life source as well, because the river, like usually societies or towns that decline, let's say like the Roman Empire, right? When it falls, all the little rural towns and stuff like this that are not close to rivers actually die out. So the river is a life source for people, and you can even take that back to the as a meme in a way, or as a reference to the Nile River as well. But the whole point of that Hudson strategy was to cut off New England from the colonies for the military and supply purposes, as I stated, which failed after a decisive American victory at the battles of Saratoga. Yeah, Saratoga. Thank you. The fate of the American Revolution, it pretty much is at the Hudson River. So that is what pretty much defines the winning of the American Revolution, is who gets to own the Hudson River.
Yeah, I think it was the same with the. Maybe I'm not sure, but probably the same with the French. The French and British wars, before that with the St. Lawrence River, probably. Maybe that.
Right.
Maybe that was similar. So.
Right. Yeah, probably. There's a lot of references. I know Doug talks about that quite a bit. So another thing that I had on my notes here is also a little bit more on this meme, theme that's taking place, is that you have this tanker, right? So Snake lands on the tanker, and the tanker is actually a replica of a real ship. The tanker is a replica of a ship called the Universe Ireland from 1967, owned by the Gulf Oil Corp at the time, the largest ship in the world. This also, this tanker is also a reference to the Clancy Brothers song, Bring Me Home, The Oil. So we're going to see this whole theme of nuclear warfare and oil and the control of information. All three of these things are going to play into each other in the game, obviously. So there was a major tanker explosion with this actually in 1978. And this is called the Beetlejuice incident. Yet again, another reference to a movie and a meme there. And this is actually a historical event, obviously. So this directly alludes this whole tanker thing, because in the game, what actually happens is that tanker gets sunk, and then there's this supposed environmental catastrophe that takes place there because of the nuclear waste that's taking place. That's leaking into the Hudson River. And this is a big cover story for the actual Patriots to further their agenda for this information control, to create this AI system, which is also called GW, which is a reference to George Washington, which is interesting as well,
Oh, yes.
So as you can see, it's so freaking layered, right? And the other thing, I'm just going to finish this tanker rant, and then there's the tanker in the game is called Discovery, which was the Ohio class sub in Metal Gear Solid 1. That's the sub that Snake comes in on. So this is a meme of the first game as well. But it also is in reference to the 20-ton flyboat of the British East India Company from the 17th century, which is the Discovery. And it's also a puns on the discovery of the Hudson River. You see how this is working, right? So it's the Discovery. Who discovered it? Well, Henry Hudson, which maybe people don't know who that is. But there was one of three ships in 1607. This is one of three ships in 1607, which was used to found Jamestown. So very important to American history. And as you can see, Hideo Kojima is really fleshing out within the first, 4 minutes of the game. This, ship in real life was actually used by John Smith to explore the Chesapeake Bay. It was also used in an ill-fated attempt to reach the Bermuda for a supply trip in 1610, and ends up being a bad omen for Hudson's expedition in the search for the Northwest Passage shortly after that. So it's all about that area and that geography and the geopolitics that's also taking place with the American Revolution. But as a final statement, which I don't know how many people caught this, the ship itself not only has historical memes, but also it has a movie historical meme, being it's a reference to James Cameron's Titanic. The ship resembles James Cameron's Titanic, and also, what is the name of the secondary main character that we end up playing as? Raiden, but what's his actual name? His name is Jack. His name is Jack, which is the name of the famous character from the Titanic, obviously. Yeah. So, that all within the 4 minutes, you have a reference to the American Revolution meme. You have a reference to Titanic. You have a reference to battles that take place, environmentalisms, oil spills, nuclear issues. You have a reference to the Twin Towers as well, because when you see Snake stand up on the ship for the first time, there's 2 smokestacks in the back, and he's standing in the middle of that, and it's a reference to the Twin Towers, which was taking place at this time period. It was right after the game was released, right after 9/11. And they actually had to censor a lot of the stuff in the game because they were worried about tensions with America by putting in things about the Twin Towers, because originally they did have it's called the Arsenal, but the Arsenal actually crashes into New York City at the end, and it supposedly damages. The idea was to damage the Twin Towers, which somewhat allude to it being predictive programming. But I think it's more complex than just predictive programming. I think it's just being able to understand that this is a historical, symbolic area, and that is a very vital point, obviously, for America, and it's a very easy target. So it's not all predictive programming. It's also the context matters about how that stuff is being done. So yeah, that was my first note on the beginning.
Just the beginning, yeah.
Just the freaking beginning.
Yeah, that's quite brilliantly done by Kojima. I think it's yeah, it was quite incredible. But yeah, I don't know if we wanted to get with the whole, American Revolution side of things, because I think that's quite interesting to see how it gets represented in the game,
right?
And because we mentioned the Patriots, so the Patriots are basically the the deep state.
Yes,
if I can say that, which is interesting, because now the thing is that most people understand the deep state to be globalists.
Right.
And in that game, however, they are depicted as sort of American patriots, basically.
Right.
With references to the American Revolution and like to George Washington, as you said, etc. And so it's interesting how that he puts it in a more nationalistic perspective. So and also because the other thing is that from what I've seen, at least what appears kind of pretty blatantly on the surface, in Metal Gear Solid 2 and more blatantly even in Metal Gear Solid 4, it's this it's the idea of the UN as a a peacekeeping institution that will be able to solve all these wars and conflicts if it gets its way, I guess.
Right. Yeah,
and basically the problem is.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was saying that. From what I've gathered, the narrative is in the games is basically that nation states and especially the United States are the main troublemakers in the world, and basically the UN should have to be able to have its peacekeeping role and solve all these issues, which however it's it's I don't know if it's an appeal to globalism directly, but that's what it looked like a little bit, because and there's also other thing like basically now Snake with it's in this NGO group that's called Philanthropy.
Oh yes, right.
With his partner that he met in the previous game, the Dr. Emmerich. So they are in this philanthropy group, and they're working. They're officially recognized by the UN.
Right.
So
right.
And they're working, to expose the Metal Gear machines.
Yeah, so the way I looked at that...
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's extremely interesting. I'm glad you brought up that group. The way I look at that...
It's a whole bunch of... there is quite a bit of obfuscations and counter-obfuscations, I guess.
There is. There definitely is. So that philanthropy group looks to me to be the environmental liberalism. Right. So one of the things is that if you're looking at the philosophy of Emmerich, Hal Emmerich, which is also his name is also Otacon, which I have a bunch of stuff to say about him as well. But his whole idea is that he's egalitarian with the information. So we're setting up this dialectic already where you have the control of information because human beings can't deal with it and they are negligent and they are just all dumb and stupid and they just want to latch on to whatever makes them feel good for the moment, et cetera, chronic hedonism. And then the other side is that everybody should have information freely, and that's what the philanthropy group is supposed to be about. But the game actually brings up the counter talking point, which is that the problem where you just freely release information to the public without context, and this context is being framed by we give things context and the specific time period that it takes place, the culture and things like that also apply to the context. But when the context is being altered or obfuscated, as you said, then it's easy for people to not truly understand the information that's being distributed to them. So this also brings up that whole argument for why we need a centralized authority, specifically in this game, the AI, the Patriots, to govern that information as a fire shield and as a filtration mechanism for the potential damages. And because of what we've done in the age of supposed enlightenment, in the age of information and in the internet. So the whole idea is setting up this false dialectic that it has to be one or the other. So the other side is the more conservative, side, the orthodoxy side, and then the unorthodox side would be the liberalism of the philanthropy group.
And also nationalism and is setting up the nationalistic and the globalistic dialectic also.
Right.
Because what I noted was that he sort of Um, even with the the thing about domestic terrorism, especially with the Sons of Liberty and the whole American Revolution meme. uh, and I think that's brought into the framing of like the domestic terrorism issue, because we have the Sons of Liberty, which are obviously inspired by the American Revolution, and they want to create this outer heaven,
Yeah.
which sounds utopian, but actually, even in the various games, you see that it was based in basically having constant war, more or less.
That's right.
So that's how pretty much he frames the. I think it's a marginalization of secession and rebellion, actually, and the ideas of the American revolutionaries, because I think it's portrayed as like sort of a crazy warmongering domestic terrorist idea, which is kind of then it's sort of happening today also with the, like, I know you can get attention from the authorities if you show like symbols from the Revolutionary War.
Oh yes.
So
yeah, especially
like
the ones from the South.
like
if
the
you show the one,
the Gadsden flag and all that stuff, you can be labeled as potential domestic terrorist, and I think that shows in the game, in this game also.
Speaking of which, it brings us to the three main characters, right? So you have Liquid Snake, which in the game is a hybrid with Ocelot. We can get to that here in a bit, but then you have Solid Snake, that's the main character that you play, and then you have Solidus Snake, who's the main antagonist of the game, right? I'm bringing this up because Solidus Snake represents the ideas of the Union in the South, since we're on this topic. So it's supposed to be, because a lot of people don't really understand the American Revolution correctly. They just think that the North was the good guys and the South were the bad guys, et cetera, et cetera. They don't understand the Civil War. Correction.
Civil War, yeah.
They don't understand. Yes, they don't understand the American Revolution, but they specifically don't understand the Civil War. And so the idea of the South, they were more in alignment with the supposed, at least this is what they claim, the non-federalist and the ideas of the original founding fathers. This was the problem. So they were trying to fight against, at one point, the overreaching federalist power to centralize more authority in the government, obviously. But everybody just looks at it that it's a battle for you keeping black slaves versus, you freeing and emancipating all the slaves. When in fact, when the North won, it just made everybody slaves. And now we have what we have because of that transference. We didn't really emancipate anybody. We just changed the methodology of the slavery, where now everybody is technically a slave, a tax slave, and many different methods of slavery being implemented because of this. Now, it's not chattel slavery like we used to have, and a lot of people just don't understand it. But yeah, this guy's Solidus Snake. Obviously, these references to the names, you have Liquid, and then you have Solid and Solidus. These are all about chemistry, and you could even take it to alchemy as well. But Solidus is also a curve and a graph of the temperature and composition of a mixture below which substance is entirely solid. So below that level would be entirely solid. And we have this idea of substance being brought in. So that keyword substance is something that we have to look into, because that's what Kojima also is talking about in this game, is what is the substance about any of this stuff? Is it just a form that's empty? Is it just a shell that is empty? And how do we get back to pure substance, which I would consider to be pure forms? But he doesn't understand that, obviously. But so the game got re-released under the name of Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance. on the PS2 as well, which is kind of interesting. But a little bit more history here. A solidus is also a Roman coin, nearly solid gold, right? So the Roman coin was used majorly, the Holy Roman Empire. So the solidus is a currency, obviously, and then also that name inspires from Isaac Sears, an American political figure who led the original Sons of Liberty. So that's another throw in there. So Solidus Snake is also a throwback to this American Revolution as well. And you see at the end of the game, his whole speech is about fighting the Patriots, right? His whole thing is that he's trying to destroy the Patriots. He's trying to take it for himself. He's trying to, I think it's, they were trying to isolate New York City from the control of the AI system or from the control of the dark occult or the globalists by letting off a nuclear weapon in the atmosphere of that area, I believe. So yeah, it's just, there's a lot going on here. And what else do I have here on Solidus? So there's a lot of stuff about Solidus we can talk about later. But yeah, I mean, my main point there that we were talking about, which is the Civil War and the American Revolution, and how he was the ideas embodied in a meme being portrayed as the adversary for the American founding fathers' principles in the South. And that's important symbolically that he's in the South and fighting in the North. Obviously, anybody who's been following the Cubbyhole or any work from, myself or any esotericist that's of value, you can see why this battle between the North and South is extremely crucial in the progression of the solar cult. And this whole game is a solar cult. It is a hero myth. That's what this whole game is about. You are embodying the hero. In fact, not to get off on a sidetrack here, but I forgot to say something about this, which you will appreciate. So if you think about the beginning of the game again, the tanker incident, when you play the beginning of the game as Solid Snake, the first place that you actually have to go, you start at the equator, which is the deck of the ship, okay? And then it makes you go north. Okay, so this is the rising of the sun. So think of Snake as the sun, archetypal sun, and he's rising into his apex. So he has to go north into the ship, all the way to the apex, into the full pinnacle of the Tropic of Cancer, and then he has to go south into the underbelly of the ship, which is the Tropic of Capricorn, where then the things are actually revealed. So he's going into the Duat after that. And then he goes into the abyss, the waters, right? So the waters is also a reference to information, but it's also a reference to spirituality. There's a lot of references with that river, again, that is more symbolic. So yeah, it's the zodiacal annual cycles of the sun, and then he's resurrected again in the second chapter. But when we get to the second chapter, we're subverted because we expect to be playing Solid Snake, but we're actually not. We're playing Raiden. So this actually made a huge backlash in the gaming community because people always wanted to play Snake because that's the hero you're egoly identified with. That's the projection of your persona into this individual, and you're trying to play as the 007 geo-espionage, hero mythos character, and you get this new character, and he's completely the antithesis of Snake. Snake is the rugged Western cowboy, warrior. He embodies principles such as Chuck Norris or any Western hero character that you could think of, Rambo, Schwarzenegger, Clint Eastwood, Chuck Norris. You got all these people, right? That he kind of embodies. Snake Plissken, right? So yes. He embodies that principle. But then you get to Raiden, who is the complete opposite. He's a coward. he doesn't want to be on this mission really. Besides his little illusion of his VR experience, he's like, yes, I'm the hero. He represents you, the player, as the character. And in extension, Kojima is pretty much mocking you at that way, because he's saying you're not Solid Snake. You actually are this individual Raiden, which is where you're starting out from. You're the ignorant fool. But what else is taking place? Well, he's a femboy. He is actually a feminized version of Solid Snake, not only in principles, being that he is extremely emotional. He's completely out of balance with his emotions, but he also physically looks feminine. He has long straight hair. His features are more composed. He has white pale skin, whereas Snake is very rugged, old looking, and that's also due to his genetic modification, because he is a clone of the boss. And so you have a lot of stuff going on here with this feminized thing. So I do have a note on the feminization. So one of the things that Kojima, I believe, and I think I did find some sources for this, that Kojima was talking about, because in this game, there's more female characters that are prominent in this game than in the previous versions of the game. A lot of people wouldn't catch that. But I believe what he's trying to say is that in the 3rd century of America, mainly it will be ran by this matriarchal psychology. And Raiden is this, obviously androgynous version of that. And he, like I said, he's the antithesis of Snake. And, you have a bunch of other characters in there, like Fortune, and you have Rosemary, which we'll get to that here in a bit, because Rosemary is extremely, extremely important. But one thing I like to say as well is that Raiden, in the later games, in Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, which is about the Cold War and stuff like that, you actually get to wear his face as a mask, as a disguise in that game. And it's an empty shell is what it is. Raiden represents the character without substance. He's just a machine, or a cog in the machine for the controllers. He is simply a puppet, a dog of war, And
he will become, he will become almost a machine in Metal Gear 4.
Right.
He's all mechanical.
So that's right. He becomes the ninja, and so he becomes a cyborg, which is a reference to Gray Fox from Metal Gear Solid 1, who's the cyborg ninja as well. So these are memes overlapping again. So Raiden's pretty interesting as a character because his whole psychology is that he thinks he's ready for war because he went through VR training, which is something that the military actually uses. That is actually part of DARPA. DARPA's been using that for a long time. The military complex has been using all this. But it's also a reference to the cultural manipulation from the Prussian school ideology of the education of the young as well. So this whole thing is about how Raiden represents the common man. He's the everyday man, right? And if you think about it, his name is Jack, the Jack of all, right? What else is a Jack? A Joker is a Jack in the card deck. So he's the clown. So that's another mockery right there. What else is a Jack? A know nothing. A person who knows nothing. Oh, wait, there's another thing for a Jack too. It also means the sun, but it's the sun at its spring equinox. So it's the new birth, the ignorant sun. The sun has not risen into its fullest prime, There's also a bit more with Raiden being a mythological reference to Raijin in the Japanese myth, which is the god of thunder and lightning, which we can get into that, but I don't want to take up all the time here. So
I wanted to say also you have Raiden in Mortal Kombat also, which is a god of which is sort of a demigod of lightning and stuff.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So here we're going back to the electricity a little bit. So you have Zeus, right, which is an anthropomorphized version of elemental powers. It's an anthropomorphized deity of actual elemental phenomenons in nature. Okay, so same thing in the Japanese myth with Raijin. It's an anthropomorphized version of the elemental powers. There's a huge story of the Raijin. You can check it out when you want to go in there. But the things that I wanted to bring up about that is that, first of all, the lightning and the electricity is a form of electric control method. Okay, so it's used to actually show in the game that you are being trained like a dog for war. So at the beginning, we talked about Benjamin Franklin with electricity. Well, that also simultaneously means that Snake is a completely numbed out dog of war because the electric doesn't phase him when it hits him. He's a blind order follower, just on command. Okay. Raiden, however, through the game, he experiences the electricity whenever you go to these terminals and stuff, and it actually zaps him. And what happens to the character, the player, is that you have this thing called a controller, right? And it has the dual shock sensitivity in it where the rumble pack goes and it rumbles to you. So it's a signal, it's a command to control the mind. Now, I actually learned that from this guy who follows me, the Logical Shaman on YouTube, and he talks a lot about this as well. He gets into some pretty good stuff when it comes to the mythology of Raiden, and so I just wanted to make sure that that's not my own pullout from that, but it is about the methodologies of controlling people through electricity and electric shock therapy and things like that.
Yeah, and regarding the whole VR training and how it is used by the military, there's a reference to that also in Metal Gear Solid 4, where you have all the mercenaries that they say these are, these kids that play the video games, then go into the VR training, and then they want to go to war, and they because there's the whole thing over there with the world basically taken over by full of proxy wars fought by mercenaries, many of whom are trained in VR initially. So
right. Yeah, I mean, this whole game is kind of war propaganda at a certain level, but underneath of that, you have the questions, the philosophical questions on whether or not any of it's legitimate. So here's a little bit more about that electrocution training. It's from Martin Seligman, and he had experiments in the 1960s. So it demonstrated learned helplessness, showing that dogs repeatedly exposed to uncontrollable shocks later failed to escape shocks even when escape became possible. So, training somebody to still be obedient, to be a broken machine, to be like a broken horse, a broken animal, that even when the doors are open, you will not actually leave your prison. So it leads to this idea of chronic passivity and the belief that outcomes are uncontrollable, meaning that whatever happens outside, it doesn't really matter, apathetic. And this is also applied in some theories of human depression and how people get stuck in these chronic psychological issues. So in the myth, which the Logical Shaman talks about, Raiden is used as a tool. I can't remember. There's another character in the myth, and I meant to put it in my notes, but I didn't get around to it. But used as a tool to go and electrocute other people, as a dog of war, and used to electrocute the player themselves through the dual shock controller. So there's a bit more about that. I recommend going to the Logical Shaman's page on YouTube and checking out that. So another thing I wanted to bring up with this conditioning, there's 3 points I wanted to make. So you have Pavlovian conditioning as well, right? Which I'm sure you're aware of, Pavlov. Pavlovian, yep. Yes. Yep. And so you were talking about the S3 plan, right? And the S3 is selection for societal sanity, right? And this is about controlling the human will and consciousness is what it's about. It's all about the domination of the individual. The whole thing is a simulation in the game. And that's alluded to many different times by the Colonel to Raiden in his Codex conversations, that it is a simulation. And that anytime Raiden tries to diverge outside of the parameters of the simulation, meaning like engaging with Solid Snake later in the game, which was not part of the simulation when he shows up at the big shell, he actually says it's not part of the simulation. He directly says this is not part of your simulation. You can't be doing this. Do not engage with him, et cetera, et cetera. That's not verbatim, but that's pretty much what he's saying. This brings to my mind two things, that Pavlovian conditioning and then also the Milgram experiment, because I believe that this game is nothing but a giant experiment on the player to see how far they're willing to go into living a fantasy rather than living in truth. So the whole game is about, it's a mockery from Kojima. It's saying, are you willing to embrace this all the way through, to the end? And we see what happens at the end where there's a big concept of free will that comes into place. But are you willing to follow these orders even though it's readily available that they are completely against reality? Are you willing to follow the AI? Are you willing to follow the fantasy, the fiction to the end? So it is a giant experiment in my point of view on whether or not you are just an order following dog yourself, and how far you'll go with your hedonism to stay comfortable rather than facing reality itself in the real, getting out of the video game, getting out of that world and into the real world and dealing with these real topics. So it is this whole concept of, are you going to blindly follow the commands of authority figures? And is authority legitimate? And how broken are you? Most people would never pull that out of this game, but that's literally what it's telling you. That you are just an order following dog and you will do anything to stay in your chronic hedonistic pleasure and fantasy. Now, I'm not saying don't have your vices. I'm just saying that that's what this game is kind of bringing to the table. And Kojima is demonstrating how easy it is to manipulate individuals on this level. So it is a very sophisticated method of manipulating players and subverting their expectations. Again, subverting it from, Solid Snake to going to Raiden, etc., but also subverting the expectations of, even the enjoyability of the game. So pretty much he's saying war is a video game, that's what it is. And you're just the character playing it. You're a blind NPC character in this program of war.
Yeah, but I guess many people who enlist think that way, that they're gonna go play a video game.
Right.
Especially the drone pilots, I guess.
Right. And we see drones in this, early versions of drones, the Cypher drones,
oh, yes,
right?
Yes.
Right? And those drones are interesting because you actually have to fight them in the big show. And what do they have on them? They don't just have cameras, they have guns on them too. So it is early, and it's actually a real drone too that the militaries were using. That's actually modeled after the real drones, the Cypher drones that the military was using. So kind of interesting.
Oh, yes. Yeah, and there's also the whole issues of being, genetically modified super soldiers, like
yes.
Snake is actually, and Solidus and all the others. And you're gonna see them in, if you go on to Metal Gear 4, you'll have the enhanced soldiers that you're gonna have to fight. So. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, it's kind of a realistic game in many aspects because it's.
Yeah, I think that's the cinema mastery about it too. He's blending fiction with reality, right? And it's this overlap of that which is not real with that which is real, and it's done in a very profound way. I think Kojima actually is a master of what I call parallels in cinema, dualism, this idea of dualism. And so we see this also as a meme, keep using that term, but this dualism, is running amok, and including the dualistic snakes fighting each other, right? The double helix snakes, the Kundalini serpents. So you have liquid snake and then solid snake, who are the opposing forces to each other. And then Solidus is supposed to be, that middle ground for the two, that middle staff, you could even say. But yeah, I mean, I think he's a master of the technique of dualism. Even to my appraisal, sometimes I feel that he's even better at it than Stanley Kubrick was with parallels. But speaking of dualism, something with the military as well that they reference is they reference this idea of dual use. Oh, this goes back to the ship stuff with the Discovery and stuff like this. Well, a lot of these ships were under this term dual use. What does dual use mean? Oh, well, it means it's items or technology or research that can be both used for civilian and military purposes, right? So that's extremely important because, for example, like the chemical chlorine can be used for cleaning, but it also can be used as a chemical weapon, obviously. So just a, thing, very simple household, item, and you can use it for chemical weapons. So that's dual use. You can use it in the military. So the idea of dual use is being brought together with the idea of the meme of information as well. So you have the dual use of information, one military and then one civilian. And that's the internet. I'm talking about the internet, obviously, because the internet was created by DARPA or ARPA, and it's being used as a military apparatus, even though we're using it right now. I'm not saying stop using it. I'm just saying that this is the origins of it, and it also correlates with the evolution of computers themselves, because computers were mainly a revolution of the military complex. But it also ties in with this idea of the war on terror as a dual use. So a new world order war and the mimetic evolution of the Cold War. It leads to this escalation issue and perpetrates advancements in war tech. So the idea is that anything that's being used that in the military that the civilians have a hold of is pretty much already completely skewed towards the power structure. It's in favor of the power structure already. But those ships, ships were used as dual use, where they were just civilian ships, but they're carrying tons of ammunition and, munitions for the war and stuff like this secretly, usually. So yeah, I just wanted to bring up that dual use as well, since we were talking about dualism.
Oh yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah, I wanted to mention something about the, there's the idea, I think, of accelerationism and millenarianism, even, if you will, with Solidus, and his plan that that he wants to bring about. Like, he wants to launch and detonate a nuclear warhead, and then possibly many of them to wipe out the like, to create something else anew from all the destruction, and they wanna like accelerate the end of the world, sort of, because I think even one of the characters, I think, says it, probably the vampire, the vamp.
Yeah.
She's another genetically modified being, and he says that the idea was to like destroy and wipe out all the ignorant masses from the earth, so they could start their they create their new world, basically. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah,
it speaks to the accelerationist idea and even the millenarianist idea, I think.
It does. You're absolutely right. That character Vamp is perplexing to me in many ways, because his name, they say in the game, the character, I think it's a snake who says it, that it's a reference to his bisexuality, and that in Europe, prostitutes were called vamps at one point. So he's very sexual. He's also feminine, and he also in Metal Gear Solid 4, he pretty much goes on to be Raiden's adversary, like to the extent of him being like almost his opposite, right? So it's kind of like what Liquid was to Snake, Vamp is to Raiden in a way. So yeah, he's nanally engineered, so an engineered super soldier, which we have running through the entire series. This whole idea about the super soldier program. You can check out Jean-Claude Van Damme's movie Super Soldier on that one. That one's kind of interesting. I don't know if you ever watched that,
I think that was Universal.
Universal Soldier. Yeah, that's what it's called. Yep, Universal Soldier. I used to watch that when I was a kid. But yeah, it is about the accelerationist and the escalation that takes place between these power struggles. So I think one of the ideas as well that's having part of the dilemma with the worldview of this game is also this isolation, this compartmentalization of all these ideas as if they're working separately from each other. Now, at the end of the game, we realize that that's actually not the case, that it is completely a part of the agenda of the Patriots. So, so the idea here is that the Dead Cell, which is ran by Solidus Snake, that's the terrorist organization that infiltrates the Big Shell, and they are supposedly trying to fight against the Patriots, which is a meme for the American Revolution. This is kind of a meme for the anti-federalists versus the federalists, which is kind of interesting because they are painted as the bad guys, the terrorists. But when you actually get into it, besides their means, besides their method of doing what they're doing, they actually seem to be kind of trying to fight for what I would consider something honorable, being the free access to information without individuals having control over that and without having censorship. Yep. So again, we have this obfuscation of what is good and what is wrong, and this postmodernism, which is what Kojima said about this game. He said this is a postmodern game, that there is no such thing as truth. It's the whole dilemma of what truth is. Do we get to make truth, et cetera, et cetera. And that is running through this game. So yeah, I think that's a crucial point to put on, which is the Dead Cell being this terrorist, right, which could be considered to be
and the Sons of as well as the Sons of Liberty. So
and the Sons of Liberty, that's right.
They are the terrorists and the bad guys, and even the the other the bigger bad guys, if you will, like the AI, they are the Patriots, so, and they have the W, that's George Washington. So
George Washington,
it's interesting the association of ideas with the American, or some of the American founders and revolutionaries, with being, being all for like violence,
right?
Instead of rightful rebellion. So
right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting the way he's
and then you have the UN actually painted as the good guys.
They're coming to save us.
Which is actually quite bizarre, because in Metal Gear Solid 4, the colonel comes back, but he's the real person, not because he's impersonated by AI in Metal Gear Solid 2.
Right.
But he was Snake's superior, and he comes back, and they are all working. they're all working for the UN in Metal Gear Solid 4, like directly.
Right.
They even supplied them with a plane with which they can go around the world doing their missions, which is copied in Splinter Cell, in one of the Splinter Cells.
But I didn't know that.
But they are completely funded, and they actually work for the UN, basically, to supervise mercenary activity. So that's another interesting theme. But one thing I wanted to say that's really bizarre in Metal Gear Solid 4, it's that they say that they are actually fighting, one of the AI servers there. I don't remember if it was GW or something else. Why? Because it will bring down the war economy. And I'm like,
oh yes,
what the hell? Like, oh well, it's they go like, okay, all these mercenaries are doing wars or these proxy wars, and it's all very bad, but we don't have to bring down the war economy, otherwise all the economy will have like a global economical collapse. And I'm like, what the
Right.
like the twisted freaking stuff there are they putting
Yeah.
out here? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
we have to stop them, otherwise they'll bring down the war economy. I'm like, what?
Yep. Yep. That's that's the sophistication of this game. I think it's one of the most profound games, up with Deus Ex and a few others, Near Automata, and a few other games that I feel are really profound in these areas. And Deus Ex has a lot of anarchist themes in it. I guess another thing I wanted to bring up was that, this information issue tends to be like the main crux of the game. And it's at this time when the internet's first like really starting to take off in the public, right? 2001, between late 90s to early 2000s. And the idea is that you have these hackers, and this hacker concept, this hacker field, or culture, you could say, is this egalitarian approach similar to Otacon's, Hal Emmerich's idea, that by releasing all this information from onto the web is going to be the savior of humanity, because we're going to all have access, decentralized access to all this information. So hacking became this revolutionary idea to fight tyranny in the late 90s and early 2000s. We see this with the movie Hackers as well. But is that what actually happened, though? Because I asked the question, are we better off now than we were then, or were we better off then than we are now? Because I think we're more polarly divided, because people don't know how to think properly, and they don't know how to take responsibility for these things. But again, people would take that as, hey, we need the GWAI to do this. So that's that same dialectic. I'm saying that the individuals need to take responsibility for it, and they have the capability to actually do that.
Oh yes.
So yeah, I think that's a big thing. But yeah, I mean, this has to do with the hacking, because Hal Emmerich is a hacker in the game. He's a computer tech whiz. He has a reference to even machines. Otacon is a reference to an otaku, which is a cultural reference to like people who are obsessed with mechs. So he's this, left brain intellectual individual who's trying to bring down the tyrannical system by, releasing all this information onto the web, and disclosure, right? Disclosure for the people, blah, blah, blah. Snowden, you could bring Snowden up as an example of this, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to bring up too, so we have this is another cool reference. I don't know if you caught this or not. So the big shell, right? It's called the big shell. A couple things I want to say about the big shell. The first thing is I believe it's actually a reference to the big apple, the big blue apple, which is the IBM computer that was named Deep Blue, okay? And it was the first computer used to defeat a master chess player. So it's the first AI system that's used to actually be a chess player. So it's a reference to this AI. It's a reference to this advancement of the technology and how far it's going to go into that. So I do think that the big shell is a reference to that, because there's some stuff in the early versions before the game was actually produced in the script and things like this that kind of reference it as the big blue apple. So that was like a name that they were using for that, and it has a lot to do with DARPA and the AI advancements coming out of the DARPA military, programs, obviously. Oh yeah, and just a little historical information on that. That was in 1997 as well, when that first chess player was defeated by the Deep Blue program. And I think it's symbolic too that it was called Deep Blue, right? Like me and you, we talk a lot about the Deep Blue with a lot of different movies being a reference to the Duat in the Egyptian mythology. So that's important for that as well. Another thing, if we're talking about all this war stuff, we could talk about the Atoms for Peace initiative from President Eisenhower, right? I don't know if you're familiar with this, but
yeah.
Yep. So it's the Atoms for Peace, but also they twist that word, so it's ADAM to ATOMS, which is the atomic, age, obviously.
Yes.
So the atomic age is going to bring in peace, right? But this was a program in 1953, which was the idea to share non-military nuclear technology with other nations. Again, egalitarianism as this form of trying to level the playing field for all these nations, right? So again, did this actually work, or is it a flawed idea that made things worse? Those are some of the questions that you could bring up with that, by giving these other nations that did not do that on their own for a military purpose. And actually what we see, even though it's called non-military, what do you think they're going to use it for? They're going to reverse engineer this stuff. They're going to advance it. They're going to use it for military purposes, obviously. So the idea, and this goes under the idea of the UN. This falls into that UN program. So it's helping other nations give more advanced arsenals than what otherwise would not have happened naturally, organically. And it's kind of funny because the big thing in the game is called Arsenal. That houses the AI. It's called the Arsenal, right? So I put that in here under my war notes, and I think it's crucial to understand that this is a anti-nuclear warfare game message. All of his games have been pretty anti-nuclear. It's all about this idea of Metal Gear, this mobilized mech suit, right? Again, a reference to Otacon as well, because he's one of the engineers who mainly creates Metal Gear, and his family, in fact. And it's a mech that can shoot a nuke from any location. It's a giant, bipodal mech that you can take to places and shoot a nuke and launch a nuke wherever the heck you wanted it. So it was really advanced military weaponry that would, obviously dominate the geopolitical warfare, territorial disputes and resource disputes for the, obviously for the one new world, the new world order, So his message, and this is interesting because in Metal Gear Solid 5, there was a secret achievement online that if you disarmed all your nukes, because you can gather nukes as a terrorist group, if you disarm all the nukes online across the whole network, if every player on the network disarmed a nuke, you get this hidden kind of you get a hidden Easter egg, a hidden scene about the the benefits of that, and about this, you get this reward for disarming all your nukes. So his message is disarm all the nukes. Ultimately, that's the whole message of a lot of his games when it comes to the nuke stuff. So he's very much in that the anti-cultural time period of the 60s and 70s with the hippie movements, and get rid of all the nukes, and at the same time he has a contradicting idea, which is like, give them all out, give them all to people, everybody needs a nuke, right? Which, I mean, I'm not arguing against that, but I don't think I want to give my local crackhead a nuclear weapon. That's like giving my child a loaded gun and letting them run around with it. I don't think that's a good idea. But does that mean I support the centralized state authority and that they should have access to that? Well, these civilians do not know. That is not what I mean by that. So these ideas can get complicated, when it comes to this. And that's kind of why this game is so profound to me, because it's shoving so much in your face about all these competing philosophical issues. Mainly the idea that you get is pragmatism and utilitarianism, which then leads to the bureaucracy, which is then just more slavery. That's the ultimate thing, But there is a message similar to Gattaca, which is about human free will overcoming informational propaganda and overcoming junk information and memes and genes. So Metal Gear Solid 1 was about gene control, super soldier.
Yeah.
Are you really just, your code et cetera, et cetera. And the whole game is like, no, you actually can, epigenetically change yourself. Your true will, your free will, can overcome that, and you can go against your genetic programming, et cetera.
Yeah, and that's in the post-credit speech by Snake when he says that we, everything is not just about passing down our genes, but there are also other things to pass, like knowledge, etc., that are not passed down, with the genes, obviously. So
Right,
so
right, right.
that's an important last speech there. Um,
Yeah, I got
but
something else for you that you'll like. Just a quick side
okay.
note here. Okay. Did you know, and I remember this, that when the PS2 came out, that there was a huge concern at the time period, you're probably around the same age as me, that they were going to be used by terrorist organizations, right? Saddam Hussein specifically, because he had bought a bunch of these, he acquired a bunch of PS2s because the CPU and the processors were so powerful that they could apply them for their rockets and their ballistics, right? So it actually led to a lot of weird things taking place in the culture at this point because it led to a lot of regulations on export of these systems, and there was a big demand for the system here in the West, and nobody could freaking get it for a time period because it was really hard to get a hold of, actually. So later, the U.S. Air Force famously built a supercomputer using PlayStation 2 consoles for scientific research, demonstrating the concept of networking gaming consoles for high performance computing. So they actually use this in military warfare as well. So, Kojima throws that in the game, in a few of these games actually, but specifically this game, where he's talking about the tech of the time, about like the systems he's using, because he gets really deep into the systems, the way the processors work and all this stuff, and that's because it's about the information transfer, how the information transfers across the system, and how they can utilize that to create a video game, obviously. But it's perpetually aligned with the advancements of military tech. That's the important part. The gaming industry is part of the military complex. People need to fully recognize that. It always has been.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, just for the propaganda aspects of it, but then obviously also the technological aspects of it, and then yeah, it's also a bit of what they are revealing that to the public, or of something that really happened, or the technology that they may paint as futuristic, but it's really not. Usually, it's kind of it's the direction that we're going, but it's also some of the stuff we are already seeing right now. So with all the automation, even in military, and AI being utilized even in military, for
And it's so
military
normalized.
purposes. So
Yeah, the AI is so normalized. That's also what's going on today, where people are not thinking; they're just using AI to get information without context and then promoting it. So this is also part of the issue with the game, not the issue with the game, but the message that the game is sending is that human beings become the propagator of false information. And what happens when the whole species starts to do that? Well, obviously it will lead to our decline and our demise, right?
yeah, we need so we need AI to
Well, we
regulate
need AI to
to
fix it,
regulate
right?
us. Yeah.
Yep, because it's non-biased, and
Oh yeah.
it can apply the context for us and the framing. And this is the thing about this game, it's trying to frame the game, just like in cinema. It's a cinema technique. You're trying to frame it like an Overton window so that you bring about a specific emotional response from the viewer or the player, right? And so the framing of this game is that dialectic, which is a false dialectic, obviously. It's a form of controlled opposition. Both places end up in the same place, which is just more control and more centralized authority, no matter what.
Yeah, yeah. There's quite a bit of false dialectics in there.
Yeah. So,
But yeah.
oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I got one more I can bring to your table if you want it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that the first speech that Snake does right before the end credits, that he's talking to Raiden.
Mm,
Uh, so and that was basically full of full of postmodernist ideas.
mm,
Which
yes.
yeah, I was mentioning the post credit speech that was way kind of way better actually uh, than that other speech that comes before the credits, because it's basically he says that like there's no such thing as absolute reality, and it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, you just have to have faith in your yeah, have faith in yourself and decide for yourself what
Mm.
the future is gonna be. so that was yeah, I was it struck me immediately as postmodernist thought. So
It
that
definitely is.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the final speech, as you're saying, with
and also that
what
you
Snake
some
says. Yeah.
yeah, sorry, but also that
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think he literally says that you decide the meaning of things,
Mm.
for yourself. So and whatever you decide is good. So
Oh, right.
that's the other big
Right, right. So it gives you this idea of true will against the control system, which is like you get to decide rather than them deciding for you. But then it's like, and whatever you decide is absolutely good. So it's
yeah.
completely relative to your own perception. You get to
Yeah,
make it as what you
especially
would.
I think it's especially that disquieting and like especially dangerous, the idea that you decide the meaning of things for
Mm,
yourself.
right.
And we see that a lot these days, like uh, when in fact, you know, things do have a meaning, and even words, like they do have a meaning, but we see even today how that gets, how language, gets becomes ambiguous. So
Right. That is true. And if you can control that,
yeah,
right, and not necessarily the word itself, the syllables, right, not the syllables, but if you control the way people think about the meaning of the syllables or of the word, then you can control the way people respond and the way that they're thinking. So if you get people to latch onto certain ideas of meaning when they hear a certain thing, and it's completely opposed. Anarchy is a good example of that, right? Everybody in most of the world thinks anarchy means chaos and terrorism and disorder, and that's not what it actually means, but that's the meaning that they've been fed through the literature, through the media, through the propagandists, through the globalists. That's not actually what it means. And the same thing with the word terrorism, right? Even the word terrorism can be very ambiguous. Well, what do you mean by terrorist? Because, you know, do you mean someone who's committing violence, like just pure violence, a person who initiates violence against another population or another civilization or their own civilization, et cetera, et cetera? Or do you mean someone who's just rebelling against authority? Because they could be the same thing, because we know that the governments label any faction that rebels against their control system as terrorist. And so when we hear these words, we're not really critically thinking about them. Most people don't. They just buy into what the media is telling them, what the officials are telling them. They're not critically thinking about, well, what's actually taking place? What's the context, the real context of it? Are they really terrorists or are they not?
yeah, not to
What
mention
is
that,
this?
yeah, not to mention that like states and government institutions, they utilize terrorism quite often. So
Right. The biggest terrorist of them all.
oh yes.
That's really who's creating the terror is the
Yeah,
state and all those who support it.
absolutely.
Yeah, so speaking of terrorist groups, Dead Cell. the terrorist group that infiltrates the big shell, right? They take over. They also take over the tanker as well. But they were, it's a, they go in under the cover of Red Cell, and Red Cell is a reference to SEAL Team 6 in the military. So if you know about the complicated history around early 2000s, 2001, with 9/11 and a lot of stuff like this, you're going to recognize the SEAL Team 6 because they were very prominent on the media. They did a lot of different terrorist, programs. So one of them is the security testing unit that simulates infiltrations and assesses vulnerabilities to test the security of naval installations by simulating terrorist or enemy attacks, which include infiltration, kidnapping, and planting of fake explosives. That sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? It's kind of interesting. A classified unit formed in 1984 by the creator of SEAL Team 6, Richard Marcinko.
Yeah.
Okay, Richard Marcinko. And so this dead cell is also a reference to the SEAL Team 6. There's a few overlaps here with the SEAL Team 6. But the interesting thing is that Kojima actually worked with the military, specifically in Japan, but he worked with Motosada Mori, who was a real-world counter-terrorist tactic expert. So he had his programmers, his game designers, and all the people involved, the 80 people who were involved, I think it was around 80, worked directly with military trainers such as this guy, specifically this guy for this game. I'm not sure as much on the earlier games, but that's one thing that Kojima did is he worked directly with the military, and he had to, right? Like to get the kind of tech that he was using in the games, to model it identically after that tech, like the Cypher drones, etc. So he had inside information working with this individual, and that's the revolution of the method as well of the game, because you're getting real tactics put into the game. And that actually was why Metal Gear Solid 1 was so revolutionary, was because of the cinema technique that he brought to the table and the military tactics that he also implemented into the coding. Let me see. I got something here. So, so the dead cell in the game, they were falsely blamed for the mass murder of an incident. So they got shoved under the rug and accused of this mass murder incident when they actually didn't do it, and that's what made them rebel against the Patriots. That was one of the reasons why Solidus rebelled against the Patriots. And then they also have the lie that they want $30 million. It's kind of like what's that movie called with Dr. Evil, Austin something, I can't remember.
Powers. Yeah.
Austin Powers, thank you. Yeah, so with Dr. Evil, and so he like demands for $1 million, right? Yeah. And then they're like, ha ha ha, and they laugh at him, right? Well, it's actually a lie. It's not what they're trying to actually do. They're actually trying to fight the Patriots, as we talked about before. They want to detonate a nuke above Manhattan, another cultural meme, of course, to cut off the Patriots and go back to the way of the founding father principles. This is the same circular thing that goes on. So here is President Johnson. This is what President Johnson says in the game. This is the dialogue from President Johnson himself about this issue of, and to me, it's exactly what we hear whenever we're talking about, like anarchy and stuff like this. So he says, whether you believe it or not, the balance of power rests in the hands of the Patriots. They regulate this country's various interests through controlled presentation, staging a drama that is palatable to the general masses. Can you imagine what would happen if they ceased to function? Picture a massive political vacuum, a space that every power monger will try to fill for their own greedy ends. I'm talking about an unregulated power struggle, panic, civil war, chaos. Like it or not, the Patriots is an organization that must continue to exist. So that's literally what he says in the game to Raiden as they're talking about this issue about the information control and the Patriots, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what we hear whenever we bring up ideas, about like dismantling the government. They're like, oh, it's going to create a power vacuum. There's going to be warlords, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody who's, everybody's going to compete with each other and fight for this seat of the throne, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so what? Deal with it. Like we'll just deal with them too if we have to. Sorry. I'm not going to use the fear of chaos to stop me from changing the current system of tyranny. Like we could use the fear of chaos for everything. That is literally a weapon to use against individuals so that they don't create any change. It's the same argument that people use to support chattel slavery, to keep the chattel slaves in place, right? Just they're gonna run amok and they're gonna destroy society and they can't live amongst us, because we're a bunch of racists and what's gonna happen to our productivity of our our productive labor and bringing in all this cotton money and blah blah blah. Yeah, it's the same freaking argument, So yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up about the dead cell and President Johnson using this as a means to say that you need the Patriots. You need them, almost like kind of like the concept better the devil you know. You need the government, you need the deep state.
Yeah, which is the same in Metal Gear 4 with war. We need war, otherwise the economy will just a giant collapse of the economy, and God knows what's gonna happen then. Well, you're
right.
Yeah, as I said, but you're complaining about all these wars now, so.
That's right. Oh man, yeah, this game is wild. Here's some other stuff I got for you. So, the shell, the big shell, it's a reference to a mythology, and it's the mythology of the world turtle. And the idea is that it's turtles all the way down. That the planet is a giant turtle, and it's turtles all the way down. But the idea is that it's a dead turtle, though, because the shell is empty. It lacks substance, so it's just a shell of a turtle. It's a form, but no substance, right? And so this turtle is known as the world-bearing turtle, bears it on its back, kind of like Atlas. And it's also interesting that the symbolism here is that it's hexagonal, right? The shapes of the actual shell itself. And that shape is indicative of a beehive, which is kind of interesting. And then it also takes the shape, so there's two compartments. There's big shell A and big shell B. But if you look at them, it's 7 points. And that represents that, Seal of Solomon or Star of David, and you could draw triangles from the top point all the way down, obviously, and create the sacred masculine and sacred feminine shape within both the structures. And the center point is where you're starting out from and moving outward, which is kind of interesting as well. But it's I think it's profound the way that he lays that out with the symbolism there. And I don't know if you caught the shapes of the shell or not.
Yeah, I did catch them with the the hexagon, the two hexagonal shapes that form the the as you said, the Seal of Solomon ultimately. So
yeah, and that's the stellar, because it's 7, so it is a reference. It's a throwback to the stellar cult, and he probably doesn't know that. And if he did, he's on the right path, but I doubt he knows that. But I think there's something that I really wanted to talk to you about, which I think you'll like, which is this idea of foxhound.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yes. What what do you think about this concept of foxhound?
Yeah, that's quite interesting and revealing. And yeah, first of all, foxhound is supposed to be the special military unit that Snake is a part of, and you have the colonel and well, and also the other what was his name? Gray Fox. I don't remember his name now, but he's another important character. But yeah, I know that Fox, the Fox represents basically the heretics or heretics in general, and then you have the hounds that are supposed to hunt them.
Yep, and flush them out, right?
Yeah,
You
just
gotta
flush them out
out.
to then proceed to the kill. so
Yeah, so
so that was interesting.
yeah, I think it's really revealing because Kojima uses Fox quite a bit in the game. He uses Foxhound in general, but you have Fox Die, first of all, which is the virus that is injected into Solid Snake, that's supposed to kill off other people around him and eventually kill him, I believe, if I remember correctly. So that, phonetically, Fox Die, right, to kill the heretic.
Yeah.
Fox hunting is what you said. It is a homage to heretic hunting back in the day that the Europeans were holding as a tradition. So, it goes back to the Inquisitions, the papal Inquisitions of the 1230s. The Dominicans were literally called the Domini Canes. The hounds of the Lord, the hunted doctorial foxes who threaten the church narrative and monopoly, right? And then it also is a reference to the Albigensians and the Albigensian Crusade, which is the military hunt for the Cathars. Yes. And then you have the Spanish Inquisitions, which I'm sure you're extremely familiar with, and that's also, rooting out and punishing any kind of deviating, against the mainstream norm. Obviously, the radicals, the barbarians, the pagans, anybody that's on the outside.
The more vicious of the, incarnations of the Inquisition. So it was the Spanish, the Spanish Inquisition.
Yes, no doubt. So I wanted to bring those 3 points up, and everything is all framed as the dangerous fox, and the fox is an extremely positive symbol of wisdom, of cunningness, of the lack of domestication. Not that we don't domesticate them nowadays, but it was back then they were less domesticated. They weren't like dogs. Dogs could be domesticated very easily. That's why we have this concept of the dogs of war. So to me, Raiden is the hound in the game, and he is there flushing out the foxes. Okay, and so he's the hound of the Patriots, and so I find that kind of interesting because we also have the Disney movie, Fox and the Hound, right? And what happens is that they grow up together and they're best friends, and then they separate. And then the hound gets trained to kill the foxes, and then so this is whole emotional thing that comes out with that movie. But I believe it ends up positively. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've watched it. I can't remember. But if we're taking that Solid Snake is the fox or Dead Cell is the fox, one or the other, then he's there to flush out that as an inquisition. He's the proponent, the blind order follower, the dog of war, there to flush them out, and that's what Snake was in the first game. He was the hound to kill the fox, right? So he's going into the facility to kill the foxes of Metal Gear Solid. But it's all under this banner of relativism, so we got to be careful about that because the people he's killing or flushing out may not authentically be a fox, but that's what the reference is to, obviously.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is they don't actually adhere to natural law, as I would consider to be the true pure symbol of the fox.
Oh yeah.
And the fox is usually red-headed, so that's something. There's something to that too, as well, right? Not all of them are, but obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to bring that up.
What about Gray Fox though? Because did you have something to say about Gray Fox. I was wondering because he appears to be important in the series.
Yeah, Gray Fox was my favorite character, actually. I think it was a lot of people's favorite character because he was the ninja. He's the Eastern tradition, which is the opposing force of Snake, who's the Western, you know, and Snake uses the gun, the pistol, right? Like the cowboy. And Gray Fox, when he becomes the cyborg ninja, he uses the katana, right? Eventually, Raiden takes on Gray Fox's identity, but not before somebody else takes on that identity, which is Olga, which is a female version of Gray Fox in Metal Gear Solid 2. She's a Russian version. That also pertains to that feminization of these concepts. So there's more females in this game than the earlier ones, whereas Gray Fox was a man, now it's a woman, right? I can't remember everything about Gray Fox, but I do know that he was extremely profound. He also went against his programming. I know that, kind of like what Raiden does. He has the electric shock therapy in Metal Gear Solid 1 that's taking place. So whenever you're fighting him in the boss scene, he has this electric shock where he's like losing himself, and I remember that very, very intriguing. But the Gray Fox itself is obviously a very important symbol. I think it represents that he serves no allegiance to one side or the other, that he is not on either side, you know, because in fact he ends up helping Solid Snake under the banner of Deep Throat, which, you know, we know that reference, and it comes back as a meme in Metal Gear Solid 2 as Deep Throat as well. And then, you know, he also kind of serves the other side. So he's a double agent pretty much. He flips back and forth, you know. So that's something that I would consider to be the Gray Fox. If he was the White Fox, you know, that would be kind of interesting, but I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, I wanted to ask you about Gray Fox. In the story, he was part of Fox Sound, and he ends up becoming the Snake's adversary in the 1990 or 1987 game, and Snake kills Gray Fox, who's a boss, one of the bosses, back in the 2D games. So.
Yeah.
And he comes back in the 1998, in the PlayStation Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah.
As the cyborg ninja. So.
Right.
And then,
I didn't play the earlier ones as much, but I have watched them and read quite a bit. And there's a huge backstory to Gray Fox. I do remember that when I was looking into him a few years ago.
He's actually the father of one of the characters, the Naomi.
Oh, that's right. So. Yeah, the doctor who injects a snake with the fox dye.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. That's true. If we want to speak about some characters, I'll tell you a crazy character. I think he's kind of interesting, you know, and that's Fat Man.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah.
Fat Man.
Maniac.
Amazing.
Bomber. Yeah.
Yep. The Maniac Bomber. He's on roller skates too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of a little goofy. This is a good example of that dualism that I was talking about, though, because you have Fat Man, and then you have his teacher, right? And his teacher was Peter Stillman, the guy who worked for the bomb unit. Obviously, he's in the actual game, the black guy, and but Fat Man is a reference, right? What's it a reference to? It's a reference to the Mark III, the nuclear bomb, obviously, right? So it is. Yeah, so it is about the nuclear weapons, and he's the bomber, right? And he plants all these explosives everywhere, and you got to go and dismantle. And he actually goes against the Patriot or the Dead Cells agenda, and he starts doing his own thing in the game, where like the Dead Cell group is actually like, we're probably gonna have to take this guy out, But Raiden takes him out in the game. But this is also a reference to the Manhattan Project. and this is, during World War II, obviously, which produced the first nuclear weapons. The Fat Man device was detonated over Japan, Nagasaki, on the 9th of August, 1945.
Yeah.
So this is also about, I always love Fat Man because there's a great story for parenting in this, which some other people have pointed out correctly. And so Peter Stillman is actually pretty much the father archetype of Fat Man. And Fat Man was completely pretty much devastated and traumatized by his relationship with this individual. So he ends up being this bad meme, this bad imitation of Peter Stillman. Peter Stillman is an individual who, from the bomb squad, obviously. So he's a father figure. And so this is a reference to bad parenting and passing down bad information to your children. And it's a reference to say, hey, not passing down the correct information, the moral information, the objective truth is actually very, very dangerous if that's not being done, obviously. And this is what's going to happen, especially when you're giving children the loaded gun, like I was talking about. So he's an abused child, and he's looking to fill himself with everything he can because he's hedonistic. That's why he's fat as well. So he's drinking, alcohol, and he's abusing substances. But it's kind of interesting. He abuses substance to fill himself with substance, but he lacks any true substance within. He lacks anything. He's just a shell, again, of what he should be. So, one of the interesting things, this was pointed out by another individual. I can't remember. It was either the Logical Shaman or another place. But the bombing of Peter Stillman's past was that it blew up it was the Logical Shaman. It was he had a huge issue where a bomb went off at a church and killed a bunch of people. And then he has like a fake limp that he limps around with. Yeah. And he's faking it, right? Yeah. Another lie to cover up for his guilt, right? But in an allegorical way, and this was brought up by that guy, and it's very astute of him to bring it up, that it kind of is this reference the end of a Christian doctrine and moving into, the Christian morals, moving into this atheistic idea of, moral relativism and or amoralism, etc. So, he didn't teach the proper morals. So the death of the church and the death of the people in there is kind of symbolic for the death of the Christian ideas of morals. Think about that however you wish, obviously. But a Fat Man represents the antithesis of that, being completely atheistic, completely driven just by personal pleasure. And he's obviously a sociopath. And he also represents gluttony as well, consuming, hedonistic gluttony, right? So what I wrote here in my notes, which I think is important, and he lacked good epistemology. Most of these characters are lacking a good epistemology. They're all shells in the game, and they have no epistemology, and they have no telos or logos. So no meaning, no purpose beyond this limited version, and no logic and no reason, right? And so another meme in this is that, it's the Big Bang, the atheist theory.
Oh, yeah.
As long as you grant me this Big Bang, everything else I can explain, but nobody can explain prior to the Big Bang, right? So the bomb is also about that Big Bang meme as well. So I really like the Fat Man.
Yeah, interesting.
He's very complex, and yeah, it's really cool when you actually play against him, because he's skating around, on these roller skates, and he's super fat, and it's kind of fun and kind of funny at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another quite interesting character.
Did you happen to catch that Rosemary, the female is a reference to Polanski's film
Oh, yeah, I
Rosemary's
was thinking
Baby.
about it. Yeah, Rosemary, and like, yeah, yeah, most likely it's a reference to that.
Right. And then she in the game she keeps asking, uh, do you remember what tomorrow is? And tomorrow is April 30th, right?
Yeah,
And it's supposed to be the day that they actually had met. But what else is April 30th as far as American history? Well, it's George Washington's inauguration in 1789.
yes.
And it also is, oh wait, the end of the Vietnam War in 1975 in Saigon. And so there's this multi-layered, thing that's taking place there. There's some other stuff. So that's the eve of Walpurgis as well, right? So it's the eve of the mid-Sabbath in the zodiacal cycle. So that's the eve of May Day, right? The eve of the destruction of the sacred feminine, you can even say, right? Because that's when we have these immolations of the sacred feminine principle by the dark occultists. But it's actually a perversion of the actual, sacred totemic ritual that's taking place with the bonfires. There's many different versions for why that's taking place, but and one more cultural reference to throw in there. It's the day that the World Wide Web became public in 1993. So again, multi-layered, April 30th, extremely important, and Rosemary is the one who saves your data in the game, saves your place. And so she's representing this archetypal feminine goddess figure, but she's not what she seems, right? She ends up being part of the AI system, and it subverts, Raiden's whole, worldview about everything. But at the end, obviously, it's the alchemical wedding between the two.
Yeah, she's real, but she was.
Yeah,
she was played by AI.
Played by AI, right?
Yeah, like the Colonel. So yeah.
Yep, a deep fake. Right?
Yeah, deep fakes. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sorry. See, this game's so exciting to me because I've been studying it for so long. I think you're gonna like this. What about the skull suit? Yeah, the skull suit's important. So Raiden wears the skull suit at the beginning of the game, right? And this is a direct reference to lacking humanity.
Oh, yeah.
It's a direct reference to lacking emotion, compassion, conscience, right? It makes him a voodoo doll for the elites. And the mask, it's really interesting, the shape of the mask, right? And it's a skull mask, but it has this rod, a filter that comes out the cheeks, but it's not really the cheeks. It's right from the jaw, right here, where you would open your mouth.
The oxygen.
The oxygen,
breather.
That's right.
The oxygen.
The oxygen breather. That's right. But it looks like a metal rod going through, like he's biting on it, like a wild dog, right? And then he takes the mask off, and then he's unleashed, right, into the simulation. Or into the fucking dogfight, more accurately said. So that's important. I've not heard anybody say that. I heard somebody else say it looked like the big cigar, which is true. It kind of looks like a cigar on one side. But I found that, pretty interesting because he's a wild, traumatized animal,
in the service of, kind of an attack, trained attack dog. So. Yeah, and we know, it's important for our followers to have their personality, restrained or abolished or removed. I mean, yeah. So uniformity and similarity, in looks, etc.
Simulation and simulacra. What did you catch that Snake's code name in the game was Iroquois Pliskin?
Oh yeah, that's I found that when he comes back actually on the scene, because we left when he was supposed to be. I mean, he was presumed dead during the tanker incident, during the sinking of the tanker in the first part of the movie. Then we have he comes back in the second movie as a, and he pretends to be part of the SEAL team
Right.
that goes to save the hostages in the big shell. And Raiden finds him, and he says he's a SEAL, and his name is Plisken, obviously a reference to Snake Plissken from Escape from New York.
Yeah.
The name is the first name is Iroquois Plisken, so that was quite bizarre. Also, the fact that he says he's a lieutenant junior grade, I'm like, that's completely unrealistic, because you had this rugged veteran that's like a
Right.
second lieutenant. It's like they
I didn't catch
could have
that.
made him could have made him like a chief petty officer or something instead. It's a junior
Yeah.
grade lieutenant fresh out of the academy or something, and it's completely unrealistic with his looks. And so that was
That's
interesting.
so true. Another lie, deceit, right?
Yeah.
So that Iroquois is extremely important because it can also refer to the Confederacy of the Iroquois people of the North.
Tribe, Native
Yes,
American tribe.
that's right. The northeastern woodland of North America. And that was in upstate, which is in what is now upstate New York.
Yeah.
So yeah, you caught on to a lot of that. So let's look at Plisken for a second.
I think they did the French Indian. They were fighting in the French Indian Wars. That was the war before the American Revolutionary War.
That's right. Yep. They were a prominent, faction, a prominent tribe. So you have Plisken, and if you break it down, if we want to get into the symbolism of the name, it's ply, P-L-I or P-L-Y, skin, which actually means thick skin, is what that means. So Plisken is the thick-skinned person, and that's how he acts. He's thick-skinned, nothing penetrates him, he goes in, he gets the freaking job done, so I thought that was kind of interesting. I had never thought about that until recently, and I was like, oh yeah. So, that's pretty revealing about his archetype. I don't know how much more you want to go with this. I can go a little bit more if you'd like.
Oh yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see here. Let's look at Ocelot. Ocelot's an important character, obviously. He represents the Western bravado, freaking gunslinger.
Yeah, even though he's a Soviet.
Even though he's a Soviet, right?
Russian, he was in the Soviet military.
That's right. So it's the blending again, the blending of two themes. But in this game, he has the arm of Liquid Snake, and then it's this battle between Ocelot's mind and Liquid Snake's mind that keeps overtaking Ocelot. And this is that dualism as well. This is an overlap of the two characters, blending them together to make them one antagonist. So, Ocelot is supposedly part of the Dead Cell organization, and then at the end he betrays them, to get Metal Gear, obviously. His name is also Shalasaska, right? And it is a famous nickname for that character, obviously. But it is, I don't know how to pronounce it, but Sharashashka or something.
Sharashashka, I think.
Yeah, and it's a secret gulag research facility. So that was what that in the Soviet-Afghan War. So that's what that's a reference to. So a lot of people don't, catch on to that. That was a throw out there, obviously, that Kojima, really understood. So His character, he's a double agent, pretty much another double agent character, similar to I would consider to be Gray Fox in many ways. You never know what side he's actually on, you know. And the idea of Liquid Snake is also that idea of that earlier heritage and earlier mimetic ideas of the American, the American way, and which is interesting because you see a lot of people that get the American tattoo, the snake with the colonies, the 13 colonies tattooed on that same arm. And I don't know if that's, I have never really looked into why they choose to do that, but I see so many people with that on there. But
you actually
also,
have the flag. You actually have the "Don't Tread on Me" flag in the on Big Shell, but it's not the Gadsden flag. It's the one with the stripe, with the red and white stripes, and the snake with the "Don't Tread on Me" motto under it. So
yeah, this game plays like American Revolutionary literature. It's what it plays like, but in a modern technological theme. It's freaking wild. It is really, really wild. But the whole game brings to me like Orwell's quote, war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, and also the other quote, who controls the past controls the future, who controls the present controls the past, obviously.
Yes.
So I think both those kind of fit this theme of this game very, very tightly. And I mean, it's just so profound. I think it's one of the most profound video games in all of history, honestly. And and when you get to the last Codex convo, we kind of briefly mentioned that it is this idea about memes versus genes and natural selection and junk data and the age of internet and what I consider to be the high priest class, the gatekeepers of information, as we went over. But you start to see that the AI is unraveling at the end for the character, right? And he can clearly see like, hey, there's something wrong here, like what's going on? And the whole premise is that you need us, like the president said, and if you don't align with us, then all of society is gonna collapse. Yeah, and it's all just gonna fall apart. So let AI take over everything, and that's what we're being pushed today, right? We're being pushed to let AI just do the thinking for us.
And that's the I mean, the Overton window you can see, even if you look at, I mean, movies obviously, but since you're talking about video games, there's like a ton of video games that push this Overton window to make you feel for robots or AIs because they are sentient. So
yeah. They got them coming to your house, man.
Yeah.
They're coming in. I'm telling you.
As I mentioned to you, I was looking into some of the Halo games, and even there, basically, at a certain point, they say that that the next step in evolution is. I mean, basically, the AI is gonna be the next step for. The highest peak of evolution, not only for humanity but possibly for the whole universe. Like, it's gonna take care of the whole universe.
Yep. Jesus.
And that's interesting. I don't know if you noticed it, but I noticed when they were talking in that Codex communication with the between Raiden and his AI handlers there. When they're saying that. That the AI is gonna be, AI is gonna be in control. So they're gonna be in control. You have you have game over appearing.
Oh, right. It pops up game over.
That game over pops up on the screen. So that's basically what's gonna happen if it really. When we are gonna be taken over by all this, so
Yeah, it's interesting.
The ultimate takeover of society.
You got that fucking right. Full spectrum dominance.
Yeah.
You know, full spectrum dominance. One of the other things that happens is that the AI tries to get you to shut the console off in the game.
Yeah.
It tells you to turn the console off when you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's part of the parameters of the simulation, you know, and it keeps like flashing things like game over and all this crazy stuff. And it's this weird, it's like the fourth wall doesn't even exist anymore. It's directly talking to the player at that point. The AI is. It's no longer talking to Raiden. It's talking to you, the player, because you are the one that's being manipulated. You know, you're the dog of war. You know, that's what that's about. And the other thing is that there is fourth wall breaks throughout the whole game where like Kojima expertly and sophisticatedly, you know, whenever there's like a tutorial or something, it's provided in a way that it's in the game, but it's also directed at the player. So it's this blurring of fiction reality. And that's another one of those advanced techniques where it's not just like, oh, here's how to play the game. It's literally part of a codex conversation of like how you actually operate the gun and stuff. And it's explained to you like it's explained to you in the real world, you know, but through the video game rather than just like a message or whatever, you know. And he did that pretty well. Something that I forgot to mention about the president name. They have like overlapping meme names in this. So, you know, President Johnson, his name is James Johnson, and this is a reference to the fourth president, James Madison. Okay, and President Andrew Johnson, and then the 36th president, Lyndon Johnson. So there's a bunch of references to the presidents in this game, and in fact, Solid as Snake, we find out, is actually the president at one point, President Sears or whatever. Yeah. So he's actually the president. So. You know, how about that? I think that's at the end of the last game, or maybe it was at this game. I can't remember. But yeah, so there's a multitude of layering with all this symbolism, and that's one thing I really wanted to focus on here was that, you know, the methodology that Kojima is bringing is so advanced and sophisticated that literally it's the Russian doll thing that if you keep looking and you keep digging into it, you're going to find more and more and more and more. And I think there's still so much stuff in this game that has not been revealed to people, and it, you know, it just really hammers on, you know, all this stuff. Oh yeah, and the president thing as well. George Sears was his name. And he is the 43rd president of the United States, which is also George Bush. And so it's taking place at that time period of, you know, 2001, obviously. So that meme of 9/11, there's a lot of 9/11 symbolism going on within the whole game, and the whole Iraq weapons of mass destruction, you know, nuclear warfare, all these things taking place, the excuses for us to, you know, continue to overstep man's authority, not that we weren't already overstepping it, you know, the war for oil, you know, the drug war, all this stuff, right? And we see this really playing out today. You know, we see from that where we are at today because of it. You know, this cult of personality, this fucking whole, you know, national socialism shit that's going on right now over here. It's so deplorable. You know, it's absolutely deplorable. So some of the, you know, the game was based off of a few different things. It was based off some loose literature. One was the New York trilogy books. And if you look deep into that, there's many names that are taken from the New York trilogy books, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with those.
Yeah, I never read them. That was just some, you know, information. I know that they pertain to some things with American culture that's kind of important, but you know, I never really got deep into looking at it anymore. But you know, I think we've pretty much covered a lot here. You know, The only thing I could add is that some of the required research material for the team that developed this game was movies, a lot of movies. One movie was The Replacement Killers. And in fact, some of the music in this game was technically that came from the music composer Harry Gregson, and he did
Harry
movies.
Gregson-Williams. Yeah,
that's right, Williams. Yep, and he did The Rock, Enemy of the State, things like that. So the music is very profound. The music is actually what really, like, I'll never forget the theme of that. It's a theme that's so impactful to me that it just shows the mastership that composed, obviously.
Okay, we are back after our internet went offline on both our sides. So, yeah, we left off talking about... Yeah, that was pretty weird.
Yeah,
so
it was
we
weird.
left off talking about the music of the game that was composed by Harry Gregson-Williams. And, yeah, you mentioned that he did the Rock... the score of the movie The Rock, and I can definitely hear it in the in the game, in this game. The opening sequence and a few other things definitely has that The Rock vibe a little bit. So
yeah, it definitely does. And he also composed for the movie Enemy of the State, which is this kind of grand conspiracy of the surveillance state with Will Smith as the main actor in it.
Yes.
And so it does play into that kind of information warfare that's going on with what I've been calling mimetic warfare. And this was done in a way, it's called a black box methodology, or a black box faction. And what that means is that it's kind of done in secrecy. But this is also another one of Kojima's sophisticated methodologies, because black box also refers to an AI system that is just mysterious, that you do not really have a grasp over. So like if you're to make an AI more human, et cetera, the black box is the coding or the processes that are taking place that are just kind of unknown or hidden in an occult fashion from what we could perceive or what we commonly would interpret. So that black box fashion is being used in this game production and game development as well within the music. So Kojima got involved with, with this composer Harry Williams, and he brought him on directly to work in this. So you can see already that Kojima is trying to revolutionize the gaming industry by bringing in actual cinema technique and composition artists from film. So he has this method of moving the techniques from one side of the industry to another. And it's very interesting because I don't see many other games that do anything like that. I mean, there's more nowadays, but back then this was revolutionary. It's similar to the cinema techniques that were being used in like The Wizard of Oz, in 1939 with Technicolor being, even though Technicolor was, already in existence, but them using it is what put it in the forefront of the cinema industry. So he's bringing a lot of this stuff to the forefront of the game developing industry and publishing industry, which is interesting because I don't think really some people who know about Kojima talk about it, but most people who are in the gaming field do not have any idea about how impactful that's been for game development, and also as a mechanism for manipulation as well, because these techniques can be used in nefarious ways, obviously. Another thing that I wanted to bring up was the intro to the game. We talked about the intro, but like the beginning kind of James Bond isk intro where you have the serpent coming in, and the serpent's obviously very symbolic when you get into the esotericism of it. But you mentioned Kyle Cooper, right? And that, or no, not Kyle Cooper. You mentioned he looked like the guy from Terminator,
Yeah,
Reese.
Kyle Reese,
You
yeah.
know, yeah, Kyle Reese. But the intro, which is interesting, and I feel like this is kind of a little puns too, was done by Kyle Cooper. That's the
Oh,
guy's name who did the intro. But he also he worked on the movie Seven
mm,
with Brad Pitt
Morgan
and
Freeman.
yeah, Morgan Freeman, yeah. And so we have this overlap. So that intro was directed and composed by that guy. So it's interesting, like how much of the movie industry is getting pushed into this game, and some people really hate these games because they're so based in this cinema technique, because there's long expositions of CGI
Mm.
and less gameplay than normal. But he kind of moves away from that in Metal Gear Solid 5, and he moves into more gameplay and less CGI, where
And
the
the
gameplay,
dialogues, long dialogues, the dialogues are
right.
too long, etc.
Yes, everybody really had a complaint about that. Another thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention earlier was that Metal Gear Ray, right? The actual Metal Gear that's being preserved on the tanker, and that's in the in-fight scene. Obviously, we're riding. You, the player, has to fight against all these Metal Gear Rays. Well, one thing about it is that, first of all, the name Ray is a solar, reference. But it also shoots a water ray out of its mouth, so it opens up and shoots a water ray. But I guess supposedly they took influence from the movie Aliens and the designs of, Geiger's work, from James Cameron and Ridley Scott's movie,
Mm.
which I feel those are just amazing, and I've talked a lot about Aliens. So there's some similarities in the design of the mech. It's way different than the earlier mechs, so they're really bringing in the zoo type onto it, because obviously Metal Gear Ray is a Mantis Ray as well. So it's about the naval fleet. So this is indicative of the military complex as well, with it being a naval weapon, obviously. And it can, the other Metal Gears were ones that were bipodal land launchers. This is one that you could launch from the sea. You could launch a nuke from, like, a submarine from underneath the sea with this obviously Metal Gear. I thought that was kind of interesting as well, when it comes to the design of the Metal Gear. And it's like a stingray, right? So it's a
Mm.
stingray. You get stung. There's a puns in that. You're gonna get stung if you play with it. You're gonna
Yeah.
get burned if you play with the fire, right? So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. No. What you said about the sort of how the game was revolutionary in the fact that it brought all this cinematic expression and language into it.
Mm.
I also think that some people from the movie industry actually got something directly from the games of Metal Gear. So, and even though this is not in Metal Gear 2, like in Metal Gear 4, there's a fight scene between Raiden and these enhanced soldiers, and he does that to cover basically to cover Snake that has to go do something else. So, and that's pretty much I found the similarity sort of immediately when I saw that in Metal Gear with the movie Doom, the new
Mm.
movie Doom, the first part, when the character Duncan Idaho, that's played by Jason Momoa, has to cover the escape of the young Duke, the Paul Atreides, and he fights with the Imperial elite troops, and the way they fight and they move, it's very similar to that scene, and also the uniforms of the Imperial troops is like similar to the to the armor of the enhanced soldiers, and it's also a blade. Both are blade fights,
Right. Yep.
and they are very similar, even in the style they do it. So yeah, I think that was taken from Metal Gear Solid 4. So
I would
think
say
even cinema got from the video game.
right. It became so revolutionary that the people in Hollywood obviously had to pay attention to it because of the methodologies that's being used. And yeah, that the blade scenes, I see what you're talking about with that, and I agree with that. They call it CQC in the game, and supposedly, Snake learns that from his mentor, the boss, and so in Metal Gear,
3.
the original Snake, the big boss who he becomes, not the clone Solid Snake, but the original one in Metal Gear 3. He learns all that from the boss, who's a female character as well. There was something else, speaking of the female thing, I forgot to mention. It just popped in my mind that when I was talking about Raiden being a femboy, well, at one scene in the game, the president, Johnson, actually grabs his sack and says, like, oh, you're a man, right? And he's surprised that he's a man. So that adds credence to my claim about that. There was
even Emma Emmerich, the sister of Otacon,
right.
Al Emmerich, says that with that hair he thinks he's homosexual, basically. He
right,
thinks he's,
right.
Effeminate or something. So
the hair being silver is symbolic of that mythology of Raiden, because in some depictions he has long silver hair as well. So I'm not sure if they directly took that from that, but it wouldn't surprise me since it's a Japanese mythology, obviously. And another thing I wanted to mention was that Mr. X, the ninja, who's Olga in this, the Russian daughter from the beginning of the game, she's the imitation of Gray Fox, obviously, and she takes on that persona of Gray Fox, the cyborg ninja.
Yeah.
Well, there's two things here. First of all, we were talking about Gray Fox. One thing is that at the end of Metal Gear Solid 1, Gray Fox goes against Metal Gear, and he gets completely, destroyed. But prior to that, what led him to being in the cybernetic suit kind of is indicative and a motif of the Osiris ritual. And then him being called, and her, I should say, being called in Metal Gear Solid 2, Mr. X, is also this Osiris metaphor. So dismemberment, rememberment, and this also plays into the information game of memetics, dismembering the information and then reuniting the information and remembering that information.
Yes.
And that's kind of what's going on through the whole game, obviously, is that, Raiden is part of this S3 plan. And the thing about a lot of people don't realize this when it comes to the way that the dark occult works in the geopolitics is that, they actually kind of put it out there for you to know that they're there. It's not like it used to be with the clandestine societies and the ruling elites where they don't want you to know. It's part of their agenda for you to know that they're there because they have a contingency set up in the political bureaucratic system for that specifically because of the context and the way they're framing the information. See, the censorship of today, which is what the game is talking about, the censorship of today is not necessarily the removal of information. That does happen, but it's more so about the way that they frame the information like a cinematographer would to give a specific context, because the meaning of that gets controlled because they understand human psychology so deeply and people have been so conditioned to emotionally respond in certain ways, obviously. So the control is, even though the control isn't directly to each individual, the control still takes place because they're controlling the frame by which the individual is viewing the world. And it's a cinema manipulation, really. It's a cinematography manipulation for politics, for geopolitics, for, the way we're perceiving the worldview that we have and the world itself, obviously. And that's kind of what the Overton window, I keep mentioning that's what that is, That's why it's called a window, because it's a frame. So I think that's crucial. And, these were, I'm just trying to sum up a couple points that I forgot to add in earlier. One of the points was that I mentioned that Raiden, he had many different, names, and one of the names is Jack, and he's also called Jack the Ripper, and he was the adopted son of Solidus in the game, in the story. So you have that dualism of the father figure again, similar to what I talked about with Peter Stillman, the bomb maker, and Fat Man, obviously, right? But Jack represents the everyday man, and he takes on those roles of these other people. So at the beginning, he takes on the role of Solid Snake. And then, later in the game, he takes on the role of the bomb disposal man, Peter Stillman. And then later as well, he takes on the role of the enemy. He dresses up in disguise as the enemy and has to play the enemy. So he has no substance. He's just a chameleon who's just shifting roles constantly. And this is a reference to who we are, too, that in the world, we don't really know who we are. We have no self-knowledge. And, we need to gain more self-knowledge, obviously, to understand who we are. And that's what each character, each boss fight that Raiden comes in contact with in this is revealing his own egoism and narcissism and his own, where he's been manipulated. But again, if you listen to the dialogue, that's all part of the S3 plan. That's all part of the AI's plan. That's what they want to see in the game, is if Raiden will choose to actually, acknowledge himself. This is why they bring in the AI of Rose and stuff like this. And even that is potentially manipulated, because the whole idea is, can love be engineered, socially engineered, right? Can your love for another person be socially engineered? Are your likes your own? Can you be manipulated into love? Because love is always seen as this data point that a mechanized AI system could never really quantify, but can they engineer it and make a proxy of it? And that's kind of the Rose and Jack, relationship that takes place as well. So I wanted to mention that. And obviously, if you think about it, the sun and the rose, right? Jack and the rose, that's Rosicrucianism right there. In my point of view, that's deep esotericism right there. And then one more, I had two more points, but one more thing is that I mentioned the big shell as the hexagonal shape, and this plays into the AI stuff that Kojima is putting in too, which is that the way it's shaped is actually modeled after nodule components of an AI neural network. So it literally is shaped in these computer, nodule frames. So if you look it up, back then at least, the graph or the depiction of those neural networks would look to be similar to the big shell. So he's layering that, on a crazy level, and it's just profound, like what he's brought into that, with the big shell. The big shell alone is a huge turtle game. I mean, have you ever this game where street performers will put like the ball underneath the cups and then they'll shake, move it around.
Yes.
Well, they call that a shell game, is what they call that. And that's interesting that he calls it the big shell, and it's a game that's being played on you, the player, and the world, etc. And it's kind of a gambling game, obviously, but it's, a marker of something that is hidden, that is out of your perception, and can you keep track of it, right? So you have to keep orientation of this thing, and it's these shells that are covering it up. And it's practiced all over the world with different, they do it with cups, they do it with all kinds of different things, but shells, they call it the shell game, So it's kind of interesting that this is the shell game. It's a shell of the former game itself, because everything in the game is playing off of the VR missions that Raiden is going through, which is all simulation of Snake's experience in the prior game. So everything is, a meme of that, an imitation of that. You got the ninja, you got the president, you have to rescue, you got the fox die virus that's taking place, you got, the nuclear threat, you got the airborne battle, but instead of a Hind-D, a chopper, you got a jet,
The Harrier, yeah.
The Harrier, that's right. And that's important to understand why it's called that too. But, so it's all an imitation of Snake's life because Raiden is an imitation of this hero myth, right? And he's trying to embody that. And so at the end, when we get to this postmodern idea, it's this idea that you get to create your own truth of who you are, right? And your own meaning. And it's all about that. And it doesn't really matter about what reality is. All that matters is that you get to choose that for yourself, right? So it's this absolute egoism again, but in the opposite extreme, which is kind of telling, obviously, because I would agree that, like I get to choose, the things, like I want to be able to be completely autonomous. I want to choose the things I like. I want to choose the information, that I should be digesting and filter out the information that I shouldn't. And that's my responsibility. But I don't get to choose what the truth is. That's completely different than that,
And what right or wrong are.
And what right and wrong are. Absolutely. That's part of that postmodernist idea that morals are just completely relativist. And that's kind of this game gets more and more into that. It's funny because it challenges it on one level, but another level it's pretty much just promoting it, which is dialectical materialism. It's the cultural Marxist idea, and this is why the Marxists always fight with each other, because they always have to keep battling with the prior ideas of the prior Marxists so that they keep coming to that synthesis, so they're always constantly in flux with each other and competing with each other. So nobody could ever agree with the pureness of actual Karl Marx's idea. They have to battle with Karl Marx's idea for their new Karl Marx idea, right? Their new Marxist agenda, because that's what dialectical materialism is. We're going to get the best result by posing these, opposing sides to each other to get the synthesis of that of those two sides, and then, but it's by suffering, it's by complete suffering.
It has to come from class warfare, so
right,
their idea,
class warfare, and just war in general. War is freedom. War is peace, right? So.
Yeah, it's the idea of outer heaven. It's the they want to build this great utopia, but they have to be in a constant state of war, as we said before. So basically, the idea is that with war you are freedom. We will have freedom and other good things. So,
so that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
That is, and speaking of the half-truth thing, because they talk about these half-truths in the game a bunch, right? Well, there's a very important motif of Solidus, which we know esoterically to represent something much deeper than what I'm about to say. But I think this is a little simpler than just the esotericism of it. So Solidus has a patch over his eye, which is a reference to Snake Plissken, obviously, with his patch over his eye. But it's very esoteric to the Egyptian hero mythos of Horus and Set, and and that whole motif, obviously. But what I think it's actually saying personally is that Solidus only has half a truth, and that's what he's only seeing half the truth. He's only seeing it from half perception. So he's not having holistic understanding because he only has one physical eye, not the one third eye, obviously, but the one physical eye. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Obviously, again, a mimetic transference of the motif. And that's what we find throughout history with the mythology. It's a mimetic transference, but as it becomes more complex, it declines, right? And that's what's taking place here. Metal Gear 1, more pure form. Not a pure form, but more pure form. We move into Metal Gear 2. It's a decline because of the lack of substance, because of the lack of understanding of the way that the information, the methodology by which the information was being preserved, and the complexity serves as a hindrance to us being able to access that substance. So I think that's also what Raiden kind of represents, is the ignorance of modern man taken to such an extreme, because he's falling prey to these complex shells, these complex forms in a way. And AI is, obviously the most pinnacle of that currently, and he is a puppet for the AI, obviously. So there's a lot more to that, but those were just some of the points that I had laid out, that I wanted to finish up on. So,
Yeah,
if there's anything.
I wanted to mention the trauma aspect with Raiden, because he actually, it seems he's just a rookie pretty much. However, he was a child soldier in a civil war somewhere, and that's when he was adopted by
Liberia, somewhere around there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe some state in the Balkans, or
right.
because he's white, so
yeah.
And so he was a child soldier, and he's obviously traumatized. There's the trauma aspect that now it's a part of his life that he wants to remove, that he has removed.
Right.
So he obviously has a shattered, psyche.
Yes.
And that is being, exploited and utilized by those that maneuver him. So I think the trauma, the trauma aspect, the trauma-based mind control, it's important to explain regarding, to mention regarding this character.
Yeah, I agree. And as I mentioned, that's the reference to all of us. We're all, under this trauma-based mind control at some level, especially those who really go deep into the military complex, obviously,
Yeah, it's linked, obviously, in this case, there's the link with the military, with the military, obviously, the trauma and people being, soldiers and special ops, etc. So.
Yep. And then now that you mention that, Raiden is avoiding facing his true self through the whole game.
Yeah.
And he sees everybody around him doing the same thing. They're all holding up a persona, a mask. Peter Stillman has the fake limp, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody is in these costumes, and then they have to reveal their true self. And so, but the conclusion of it is that the true self is this God that gets to, deem, be the arbiter of right and wrong and all this stuff. So the conclusion's wrong. The premise is okay. It's like, yeah, you need to, pierce that veil of your persona and understand what the true self really is. And you need to ask these hard questions about this. And you need to deal with your subconscious trauma and do the shadow work. But unfortunately, it can be weaponized against us. And I think that's what a lot of people in the movements don't understand, is that unless it's framed properly, that information can be weaponized because it's being framed in a way that alters the way that we see the meaning of that. And that's why cinema is so important, because it reveals to the viewer something that's within inside of ourselves. It's a reflection of the archetypal realm. It's a reflection of who we are. I always tell everybody whenever I'm watching a movie, I'm looking at every character as a aspect of my own subconscious, as an aspect of my own self, and the potential, the potentials of the things that an individual could do if they manifest those parts of themselves, because we all can do the greatest evil in the world. We can all become a freaking mass murdering sociopath, psychopathic individual, and nobody wants to face that. Nobody wants to deal with that darkness within themselves. We always want to give ourselves an excuse like, no, there's no way I can do that, Well, that's not quite the case. And sometimes all it takes is that one bad day for someone to just go over the edge and latch onto it and never come back. go into the abyss and just completely become pure evil. And that's why you have to face it, so that when something like that, if something like that ever occurs, you're prepared for being able to pull yourself back out of the abyss, and pull yourself out of that dark state of consciousness, obviously.
Yeah, and I think many people that go into this, into the military or into these programs are, that's what they're doing. They're not able to pull themselves back from whatever it is that is pushing them towards that life. So
Right. Absolutely right. Oh yeah. One more thing just to throw in here. He was also called the White Devil. Jack was called the White Devil. You mentioned that he was a white man, right? Well, he's called the
yes,
White Devil, right?
yeah,
That's his nickname, Jack the Ripper and the White Devil. So that reveals quite a bit, obviously, about his character. And everybody, like I said at the beginning, everybody fucking hated playing Raiden. Everybody did, And I think part of that is because they see within Raiden themselves, this is who they are. And not even at the end of the game. I mean, everybody's stuck at the beginning, Everybody is stuck right at the beginning where they are playing these fictional characters to a T and completely disregarding anything of real substance, of real truth, of real value in this world.
yeah. So, well, I don't know if you have anything else to add, but I think we are good for
Yeah.
for this one. We've talked quite a bit, uh, yeah, quite a bit of information laid out on this game.
Mhm.
So yeah, as you've seen, these games go pretty. We can go pretty deep with with these games and probably with many others. So um, well, I guess that's all for me. And yeah, Brandon, thank you for having been here. Was a very interesting conversation as usual. So I don't know, yeah, tell people where they can find your work, and then we can close.
Yeah, you can find my work at seedtruth.com. Real interesting. Seed, SEED, truth. Easy to spell. If you can't spell truth, then you better freaking learn how to, obviously. .com. And yeah, that's been quite a pleasure. And I think we did a pretty good job of laying out a lot of the information to this. Good summary there of this game. And I highly recommend anybody who's really interested in the topics to go check out, people on YouTube, or check out essays that people have written about the game, because it is profound. Or just study it yourself. You don't have to play it. You can just watch the video. There's plenty of playthrough videos you could watch. But yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say as a final statement is that, as individuals, we need to get a firm epistemology, ethics, a firm basis in universals, obviously, the logos, logic, and metaphysics. So, and I think that that's something this game kind of helped me to open up, is to kind of deal with these more complex topics for a good foundational worldview. Thank you for bringing me on. I love coming on here and talking with you, man. It's always such a pleasure.
Oh yeah, no problem, man. Thank you. And yeah, I don't know if we'll do something similar in the future. I think I'm gonna have to concentrate a little bit more on the probably on the Italian side of things with my work. Doing more things in Italian. And so, but who knows? You know, we might we might have the occasion to come back here for another one of these shows. So, yeah,
Awesome.
we'll see. And yeah, that said, yeah, thanks to everyone who has watched, and yeah, see everybody next time.
Life isn't just about passing on your genes. We can leave behind much more than just DNA. Through speech, music, literature, and movies, what we've seen, heard, felt, anger, joy, and sorrow. These are the things I will pass on. That's what I live for. We need to pass the torch and let our children read our messy and sad history by its light. We have all the magic of the digital age to do that with. The human race will probably come to an end sometime, and new species may rule over this planet. Earth may not be forever, but we still have the responsibility to leave what traces of life we can. Building the future and keeping the past alive are one and the same thing.